Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file that is, quite frankly, heavy. And I don't just mean the stack of research papers and biographies we've got here. I mean the sheer weight of the mythology around the man we're discussing.
It is a heavy file, and it's a dusty one. It smells like, gunpowder, horse sweat, and old celluloid film.
That is a very specific mix, but it fits. We are talking about Francisco Pancho Villa. Now, before everyone rolls their eyes and pictures like a cartoon character in a sombrero, I want to set the stage. Because the sources we've pulled for this paint a picture that is so radically different.
That caricature is actually a fascinating part of the story in its own right, but it does a real disservice to the man himself. I mean, if you strip away the Hollywood image, what you're left with is a figure who is much more terrifying and, honestly, much more impressive. You're looking at a logistical genius, a man who essentially invented mobile hospital units in warfare, a governor who ran a sort of socialist state in the middle of a civil war, and, technically, the only foreign commander to successfully invade the continental U.S. since the War of 1812.
That last point just always blows my mind. He invaded the U.S. and then spent months playing hide-and-seek with the entire U.S. Army. And got away with it.
Got away with it.
But we'll get there. Our mission today is to figure out how a sharecropper, a kid with zero formal education, built the most professional army in Latin American history. I want to understand the mechanics of it. How do you feed that many men? How do you pay them? How do you govern a state when you're illiterate?
Those are exactly the right questions, because Villa wasn't just a bandit chief. He was a CEO of chaos. But to understand the CEO, we have to understand the intern phase, or maybe the sharecropper phase. We have to go back to Durango in 1878.
So let's set the board here, because context is everything. Villa, who was born Queo Arango Orambila, was born into a system that I think is hard for us to really wrap our heads around today. We hear sharecropper, but the Mexican hacienda system was something else entirely, wasn't it?
It was feudalism. That is really the only way to describe it accurately. Imagine a company town, but the company literally owns you, your parents, and your children. The haciendas were these massive estates, some the size of small European countries, owned by one family.
Wow.
And the workers, the peones, they were tied to the land through debt. You bought your food at the company store, the tienda de raya, at inflated prices, on credit, and you could never, ever pay it off. And that debt was hereditary.
Wait, so if your dad died owing the landlord money, you inherited the debt?
Exactly. You're born in the red. And legal recourse, it was non-existent. The hacienda owner was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. He had the right of pernada, which was basically the right to abuse the women on his estate. It was a system of absolute control.
So this is the world Doroteo Arango grows up in. He's just working dawn to dusk, seeing his family ground down by this machine.
Right. And this leads us to what feels like the inciting incident. It's almost cinematic, like a Western movie trope. But the sources all seem to agree on the core details. Villa, or Doroteo at this point, is 16 years old.
Okay, so it's 1894.
It is. He comes home from working in the fields, and he finds the hacienda owner, a guy named Agustin Lopez Negrete, inside his house. The accounts vary a little bit, but the core fact is that Negrete was harassing Doroteo's sister, Martina. The implication is pretty clear. It's imminent sexual assault.
And a 16-year-old peon is just supposed to, look at the floor and let it happen. That's the social contract of the hacienda.
That's the deal. Defying the patron is suicide. But Doroteo, he grabs a pistol, some sources say it was his cousin's, and he shoots Negrete. He doesn't kill him, he just hits him in the foot. But the bullet doesn't matter. The act is what matters. He broke the ultimate taboo. He raised a hand against the master.
So he has to run. This is the moment Jose Doroteo Arambila dies, effectively, and the outlaw is born. He heads for the hills.
Specifically, the Sierra Madre Occidental.
Oh.
And I want to pause on the geography here because it explains so much about his future military success. These mountains are just unforgiving. We're talking about canyons that rival the Grand Canyon, scorching heat, freezing nights, and these labyrinthine trails.
Right.
To survive there, you have to become part of the landscape.
So this is his university. He's not at West Point. He's just trying not to starve or get eaten by a puma in the Sierra Madre.
Precisely. For roughly the next 16 years, he lives as a bandit. He joins gangs. He learns to shoot from a moving horse. He learns how to find water where there is none. He becomes a master of the terrain. And somewhere in this period, he changes his name to Francisco Villa.
Why that name? Is it just an alias to protect his family back home?
That's part of it. There's a theory he took the name of a legendary bandit grandfather, Jesus Villa. Another says he took it from a bandit leader in Coahuila who died, and he just kind of assumed the mantle. But Pancho is just a common nickname for Francisco. It's a regular guy's name. It's accessible.
But up until 1910, he's just a criminal, right? A cattle rustler. He worked as a butcher, which I guess gives him some knowledge of anatomy that might come in handy later on. But he's not a revolutionary. He's not thinking about political reform.
Not at all. Not yet. He's a social bandit, as the historian Hobsbawm would say. He steals from the rich because everyone he hates is rich, but he's not trying to overthrow the government. He's just trying to survive. But then he meets the mentor figure, Abraham Gonzalez.
This relationship fascinates me. Gonzalez is an intellectual, upper middle class. He's a representative for Francisco Madero, who's running for president against the dictator Porfirio Diaz. So why does a guy like Gonzalez even bother talking to a dirty, wanted fugitive like Villa?
Because Gonzalez understands something fundamental about revolutions. Intellectuals start them, but rough men finish them. He looks at Villa, and he doesn't see a thug. He sees a natural leader who hates all the same people Madero hates. He sees a weapon.
So he pitches him on the revolution.
He sits him down, and he basically explains why Villa's life has been so hard. He gives him the political vocabulary for his own suffering. He says, you're not hungry because you're lazy. You're hungry because the system is rigged. And if you fight for Madero, we can unrig it.
That's the Robin Hood pitch. It validates everything Villa has done. It tells him your violence can be virtuous.
And it works. Villa recruits his bandit friends, and suddenly the revolution has a cavalry. When the fighting starts in 1910, Villa isn't just good at it. He is a savant. He captures haciendas. He takes towns. Madero, this little intellectual with a high-pitched voice, eventually promotes this ex-cattle rustler to colonel.
Okay, so Madero wins. The dictator Diaz flees to Paris. Madero becomes president. It seems like the movie should end there. Villa retires, right?
He tries. He actually does try to settle down. But the Mexican Revolution is just messy.
Yeah.
In 1913, there's a coup. General Victoriano Huerta, a brutal, alcoholic, old-school general, murders Madero. It's known as the 10 Tragic Days.
And this is the catalyst. This is what creates the Pancho Villa we all know today. Madero was his idol. Madero was the guy who gave him legitimacy. And now Madero is dead.
Villa is devastated,
Yeah.
and he is enraged. He crosses the border from the U.S. back into Mexico with, and I want you to picture this, 8 men, 2 pounds of coffee, and 500 rounds of ammunition.
8 men.
8 men. And from that tiny seed, within months, he builds the División del Norte, the Division of the North. And this is where we have to stop looking at him as a bandit and start looking at him as a general. Because what he builds is not a guerrilla band. It is a modern, industrialized army.
Let's dig into the how here. Because you mentioned earlier he used railroads. In the movies, we always see the guys on horses. But you're saying his army was rail-based.
The horse was for the battle. The train was for the war. Villa understood logistics better than the West Point trained generals he was fighting. He controlled the rail lines from the U.S. border all the way down into central Mexico.
Wow.
This let him move heavy artillery, ammo, food, and thousands of men at speeds the Federal Army just couldn't match. But he didn't just use the trains, he managed them. He hired American railway foremen. He had repair crews that could fix a blown track in hours.
He's like a moving city.
It was a moving city, and this
Right.
city had services. The most revolutionary thing he did, pun intended, was the medical corps. Before Villa, if you got shot in a Mexican Civil War battle, you were left to rot. Or maybe, if you were lucky, someone poured tequila on the wound. Villa created dedicated hospital trains.
Like mobile ERs.
Yes, white cars with red crosses painted on the side. He hired the best surgeons he could find. Mexicans, Americans, French. They had operating tables, sterilization equipment, triage protocols. They could perform amputations and bullet extractions while the train was moving away from the front line.
That is incredible. And from a morale standpoint, that has to be huge. Knowing that if you take a bullet, there's a doctor waiting for you, not just a vulture.
It was a massive recruiter. And the other thing that recruited well, he paid in cash.
Real money, not IOUs.
Silver and gold, or currency that was backed by it. He paid his soldiers 1 peso a day. That sounds like nothing now, but for a peon who maybe earned a few centavos a day on the hacienda, this was a fortune. It meant you could send money home and professionalize the army. You didn't need to loot a village to eat. Villa fed you and paid you.
But where did he get the money? I mean, 8 men and some coffee doesn't just turn into a payroll for 50,000 soldiers?
Well, he had a few revenue streams. One, he confiscated the assets of all those hacienda owners he hated. He sold their cattle to the U.S. We're talking millions of dollars worth of beef. But he also understood the power of the media. And this is my favorite Villa detail. The Hollywood deal.
Okay, Talk to me about this, because it sounds completely fake. He signed a contract with a movie studio.
In January 1914, he signs a contract with the Mutual Film Corporation. They pay him $25,000 in gold, a huge sum then, plus a percentage of the profits. In exchange, they get exclusive rights to film his battles.
Wait, actual battles with people really dying?
Yes, and the contract had stipulations. Villa allegedly agreed to fight during daylight hours whenever possible because, the cameras need a good light. There are stories, though some historians debate this, that he delayed an attack on the town of Ojinaga because the film crew wasn't ready yet.
That is dystopian. It's like reality TV, but with actual casualties.
It is surreal. But for Villa, it was totally pragmatic.
Yeah.
He needed the money for ammo, and he needed the American public to see him as a hero, not a bandit. He even got a custom-made uniform for the cameras because his old one looked too dirty. He was shaping his own legend in real time.
So he's a media mogul, a logistics expert, and a general. But let's shift to the other role he took on, which I think is the most surprising, the administrator. In 1913, for about a month, he serves as the provisional governor of Chihuahua.
And everyone expected a total disaster. They thought, the bandit is in the governor's palace, hide this silverware. But instead, he engaged in this frenzy of administrative activity. He worked 18-hour days. He dictated letters to secretaries because he couldn't write well enough himself.
What was his policy agenda?
It was populist and, honestly, surprisingly sophisticated. First thing, he slashed the price of meat. He ordered that meat be sold at a fraction of the market rate so the poor could finally afford it. He threatened butchers with execution if they price gouged.
The butcher becomes the regulator.
Exactly. But his biggest move was education. Villa had this reverence for education, probably because he lacked it himself. He famously said, "I love nothing on earth so much as a school teacher." In that 1 month, he ordered the construction of 50 schools.
50.
50. He was obsessed with the idea that the only way to break the cycle of the hacienda was through literacy.
But let's go back to the economics. You can't just slash prices and build schools without crashing the economy. So how did he handle the banks?
With a crowbar, essentially. He printed his own currency, the famous Villa bills. And obviously the banks and the wealthy merchants, they didn't want to accept this paper money. They wanted gold. So Villa just issued a decree. Anyone refusing his currency would be jailed or shot. He forced the currency to trade at par with the gold peso.
That's fiat currency taken to the literal extreme. Just let it be done.
It worked, temporarily, because he had the gun to back it up. He also engaged in what might be the greatest legal bank heist in history. He went after the Terrazas family, the biggest landowners in Chihuahua. Louis Terrazas had fled, but his son was still there. So Villa took the son hostage.
This is the Terrazas gold story.
Yes. Villa knew the family had millions in gold reserves hidden somewhere. He interrogates the son. The son won't talk. So Villa puts him through a mock execution. Finally, the son breaks and reveals the location, a column inside the Bank of Chihuahua. They tear open the pillar, and gold coins just pour out.
It's like Ocean's 11, but he's the governor.
And he uses that gold to fund the army and the schools. It's wealth redistribution at the barrel of a gun. The historian Friedrich Katz calls this the first welfare state in Mexico. It was crude, it was violent, but for the poor in Chihuahua, Villa was delivering what the government never had: food, education, and dignity.
So he's at the absolute peak of his power. He has the division of the North, he has the money, he has the fame, but there's a storm coming. And that storm is his own boss, Venustiano Carranza.
Carranza is the first chief of the Constitutionalist Army. Ideologically, he and Villa are on the same side. They're both against the dictator Huerta. But personally, they are oil and water. Carranza is this tall, bearded aristocrat. He wears colored spectacles. He sees himself as the future president. And he sees Villa as a useful barbarian, a tool to be used and then discarded.
And Villa can sense this condescension, I'm sure.
Oh, he hates it. Villa calls Carranza the old man. He thinks Carranza is soft. The tension just explodes in 1914 over the Battle of Zacatecas.
Let's dive into Zacatecas, because the sources describe this as the single bloodiest battle of the entire revolution. What were the stakes?
Zacatecas was the gateway to Mexico City. Whoever took Zacatecas would effectively win the war against Huerta. Carranza, terrified that Villa would win all the glory and march into the capital first, orders Villa not to attack. He orders him to go to a different city, Saltillo. It's a completely nonsensical order, purely political.
So he's actively sabotaging his own best general just to keep him from getting too popular?
Exactly. Villa is furious. He offers his resignation. Carranza accepts it. But then Villa's generals, his loyal officers, they refuse to accept a new commander. They basically tell Carranza, we ride with Villa or we don't ride at all.
Wow.
So Carranza's hand is forced. Villa ignores the orders and attacks Zacatecas anyway.
Describe the battle, because Zacatecas isn't an open field, right? It's a city surrounded by mountains.
It's a natural fortress. The Federal Army is dug in on two massive peaks, La Bufa and El Grillo. They have heavy artillery pointing down on all the approaches. To take the city, Villa's troops have to charge uphill directly into machine gun fire.
This sounds like a suicide mission.
It should have been, but Villa coordinates this brilliant pincer movement. He uses his artillery, which is commanded by a former federal officer, Felipe Angeles, who's a genius in his own right, to suppress the enemy guns. Then the infantry and the cavalry just swarm up the slopes. It is brutal, hand-to-hand combat.
The death toll is staggering.
Depending on the source, somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 federal soldiers are killed. Many try to flee, but Villa's troops have cut off the retreat. They literally hunt down and execute the federal officers. It's a massacre.
Yeah.
But it breaks the Huerta regime. Huerta flees the country. The revolution is won.
Because Villa defied orders to win it, the victory is actually the beginning of the end for him.
Right. Carranza never forgives him. The victors split. And now it's a new civil war, the conventionists, which is Villa and his southern ally Zapata, versus the constitutionalists, which is Carranza and his genius general Alvaro Obregón.
And this leads us to the downfall. The Battle of Celaya in 1915. We have to talk about Alvaro Obregón. We haven't mentioned him much, but he really seems to be the anti-Villa.
He is. Obregón is a pragmatist. He's not charismatic like Villa, but he is studious. And he has been reading reports from a war happening across the ocean, World War I. He sees that the era of the glorious cavalry charge is over. The era of the machine gun and barbed wire has arrived.
So Villa is still fighting a 19th century war, and Obregón is fighting a 20th century war.
Precisely. At Celaya, Obregón finds this flat plain. He digs trenches. He lays out miles of barbed wire. He positions his machine gun nests with overlapping fields of fire. He creates these kill zones.
Then Villa
does what has always worked for him. He relies on elan, on spirit, on the terrifying momentum of a mass cavalry charge. He throws his Dorados, his elite golden ones, at the constitutionalist lines.
It must have been just horrific. Horses against machine guns.
It was a slaughter. The horses get tangled in the wire. The machine guns just mow them down. Villa attacks not once, but dozens of times over several days. He refuses to adapt his tactics. He just keeps feeding men into the grinder.
There's a detail in the notes about searchlights.
Yes. Villa tries these desperate night attacks, thinking he can use the cover of darkness. But Obregón has these powerful electric searchlights powered by generators, possibly using U.S. equipment. He just flicks the switch, illuminates the entire field, and his gunners open fire on the targets. It's technology beating bravery.
So Villa loses. And he doesn't just lose. The Division of the North is shattered.
It ceases to exist as a major fighting force. Villa retreats north. He's no longer a general commanding 50,000 men. He's back to being a guerrilla leader with a few hundred loyalists. He's back in the mountains where he started.
And he's bitter. He blames Obregón, sure. But he also starts to really blame the United States. Why? I mean, he was the darling of the U.S. media. He was the guy with the Hollywood contract. What changed?
Realpolitik. President Woodrow Wilson decides that Carranza is the best bet for stability in Mexico. So the U.S. officially recognizes the Carranza government. They even allow Carranza to move troops on U.S. railroads to outflank Villa. And worse, they place an arms embargo on Villa.
So he's cut off. He can't buy bullets. And the Americans are actively helping his enemy.
And there's this one story, well, it's hard to verify, but Villa absolutely believed it, that he paid for a huge shipment of ammunition from an American dealer. And when he opened the crates, the cartridges were defective, just wood bullets or empty casings. He felt totally swindled and betrayed.
That betrayal is the fuel for what happens next. The raid on Columbus, New Mexico, March 9th, 1916. This is the moment Villa goes from Mexican general to enemy of the state in American eyes.
It's 4 a.m, pitch black. Villa has about 485 men. They cross the border and creep into this sleepy little town, Columbus. There's a U.S. Army garrison there, Camp Furlong.
What was the plan? Was it just kill Americans? Or was there a strategy?
It was messy. On one level, they wanted to loot supplies. Guns, horses, mules. They wanted to burn the town. But strategically, Villa wanted to provoke an intervention. He knew if he attacked the U.S., Wilson would have to invade Mexico. And if the U.S. invaded, Carranza would look weak if he didn't fight back. Villa was trying to cause a war that would destabilize his enemies.
So the shooting starts.
It's total chaos. Villistas are setting fire to hotels and stores. Civilians are running into the streets. The U.S. soldiers at the camp wake up to the sound of gunfire. There's this frantic defense. The Americans set up machine guns, but they keep jamming in the dark.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare.
The town is burning. The light from the fires actually helps the U.S. soldiers see their targets. After a few hours, Villa retreats. The toll is roughly 18 Americans dead, civilians and soldiers, and about 80 of Villa's men.
Militarily, it's a skirmish, but politically, it's Pearl Harbor. You cannot burn an American town and get away with it.
The American public goes ballistic. Catch Villa. Kill Villa. President Wilson has no choice. He orders General John J. Pershing, Blackjack, to take a massive force and go into Mexico to get Villa dead or alive.
This is the punitive expedition, and the scale of this is massive.
It's huge, 10,000 troops eventually. And this is the modern U.S. Army's debut. They bring the first convoys of motorized trucks, Dodge and White trucks. They bring the first Aero Squadron with their Jenny biplanes. They are bringing the 20th century to hunt a guy in the mountains.
And it fails spectacularly.
It's a comedy of errors. The trucks, they get stuck in the Mexican mud and break their axles on the rough trails. The airplanes, the altitude in the Sierra Madre is too high. They can't get enough lift. They keep crashing. They can't find Villa anywhere.
He's just ghosting them.
He's wounded, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He took a bullet in the leg in a separate skirmish. He's literally hiding in a cave, recovering, while Pershing is marching around Chihuahua chasing rumors.
Yeah.
And the local population, they hate the Americans. They mislead the troops, send them in the wrong direction. Villa becomes a national hero again because he's making the gringos look like fools.
For 11 months, the U.S. Army just wanders around Mexico. They kill some of Villa's lieutenants, they fight a few battles, but they never, ever catch him.
Eventually, with World War I looming in Europe, Wilson pulls the plug. Pershing goes home empty-handed. It's pretty much the only time the U.S. Army has really failed a mission like that right on its own border.
So Villa survives. He outlasts the expedition. He outlasts the revolution, really.
Yeah.
By 1920, Carranza is assassinated. The new guys in charge, Adolfo de la Huerta, Obregón, Calles, they just want peace. They want the country to stop bleeding.
So they offer Villa a buyout, a retirement package.
Please stop fighting, and we will give you a hacienda.
Basically. They give him the Hacienda Canutillo, 25,000 acres, and they let him keep a personal bodyguard of 50 of his former fighters. And the government pays for it all.
So he sets up his own little utopia.
He does. He basically rebuilds his vision of society on a small scale. He builds a school. He buys modern farm equipment. He's living the life of a country squire. He tells journalists, "I am done with politics. I just want to farm."
Do we believe him?
The government certainly didn't. It's 1923. Elections are coming up. Álvaro Obregón is president, and he wants to handpick his successor, Plutarco Elias Calles. They know Villa hates Calles, and they are terrified that Villa will ride out of Canutillo with his 50 men, recruit 50,000 more, and start the war all over again.
So it's a preemptive strike. They decide they have to kill him.
It's a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government. A local congressman, Jesus Salas Barraza, organizes the hit squad in the town of Peril, where Villa liked to visit.
Let's walk through the assassination. It's July 20, 1923.
Villas is in Corral. He's visiting one of his wives. He had many. He's driving his 1919 Dodge touring car. He's driving it himself, which is rare for him. He's got his secretary next to him and a few bodyguards in the back. But he's relaxed. He's laughing.
He drives past a street corner.
On the corner, there's a pumpkin seed vendor. He's the lookout. As Villa's car approaches, the vendor shouts, "Viva Villa!"
A salute?
A signal. He shouts it once to say, "He's coming." Then he shouts it again to signify he's the one driving.
That is dark. Using the man's own rallying cry to signal his executioners.
As the car turns the corner, 7 riflemen pop out of a building. They're holding semi-automatic rifles. They unleash a fusillade. Over 40 shots hit the car.
And the details here are just gruesome.
They use expanding bullets, dum-dum bullets, used for big game hunting. They tear massive holes. Villas is hit in the head and the chest. He dies instantly. His hand was found reaching for his pistol, but he never even got it out. The car swerves and hits a tree.
There's that legend that he said, "Don't let it end like this. Tell him I said something."
Laughs softly.
Ah.
Yeah, that's the myth. But the autopsy and the witnesses make it clear. His brain was destroyed instantly. He didn't say a word. He just died.
So the center of the North is dead. The government breathes a sigh of relief. But the story has this one last weird epilogue. 3 years later, 1926.
It's the final twist. Villa is buried in the cemetery in Perel. One night, grave robbers dig up the coffin, they pry it open, and they cut off his head.
Just the head.
Just the head. They leave the body and take the head.
Why? I mean, who takes a head?
That is the great mystery. There are 3 main theories. Theory 1, a local rival did it as a trophy. Theory 2, An American treasure hunter named Emil Holmdahl stole it to sell to an eccentric millionaire who collected skulls.
And Theory 3.
Skull and Bones. The secret society at Yale University. The rumor, which has persisted for a century now, is that Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's father, bought the skull for the society's tomb.
Is there any actual evidence for that?
None that holds up. Skull and Bones, of course, denies it, but the head has never been found. It's probably sitting in a box in someone's attic or buried somewhere in the desert.
It's fitting, in a way. The man was a myth in life, so he has to be a mystery in death.
It cements the legend, doesn't it? You can kill the body, you can display the corpse, but you can't quite capture the head of the movement.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, how do we assess Pancho Villa? We've seen the bandit, the general, the governor, the killer.
I think the best artifact to summarize him is that currency we talked about, the Two Faces bill.
The one he printed in Chihuahua.
Yes. On one side, it had the face of Madero, the idealist, the martyr. On the other side, it had the face of Abraham Gonzalez, the intellectual mentor. It shows his loyalty. But the name Two Faces is just perfect for Villa himself. He is the two faces of the Mexican Revolution.
The liberator and the warlord.
Exactly. He is the man who built schools and fed the poor. He's also the man who massacred prisoners and burned a town. He represents the raw, volcanic energy of a people who had been oppressed for centuries. And when that energy finally explodes, it creates. But it also destroys.
And that energy shaped modern Mexico, for better or for worse.
It did. He forced the country to reckon with its poor. He proved that a peon could lead an army. He's a reminder that if you push people hard enough for long enough, eventually they push back. And sometimes they push back with trains and artillery.
That is a powerful place to leave it. A complex man for a complex time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. If you want to see photos of that Two Faces currency or the hospital trains, check the show notes. We'll see you next time.